Let's move on to the second segment, which talks about your experiences as a student, a Master's of Social Work student at the University of Minnesota Duluth, and your participation with the Center for Regional and Tribal Child Welfare Studies.
Okay.
So can you tell me about why you chose to attend UMD for your Master's of Social Work?
I chose to attend UMD because I already lived in the area, and they had come and presented at Scholastica where I got my undergrad and said that they had a kind of a fast track program so I could get my MSW within a year. So I figured, hey, they've got a fast track program. They're focused on American Indian communities. That's something that I wanted to learn more about at the time because I'm from the area but didn't grow up here. So I figured that would be a safe way for me to learn about the community and learn social work.
Wonderful. Can you tell me a little bit about the American Indian focus that they had there?
When I was there back in, gosh, was it 2010, 2011, there were quite a bit of Indigenous staff that were there. So there was the Priscilla Day, John Day, Muscatee. They had staff that were overseeing the department, so they were looking at everything through that American Indian lens, which I thought at the time was really great. It was something that I've never experienced. In an education system. The classes that they had, they were all great classes, you know, learning about social work, the human and the environment, and the theories and research and all of that, but there was a piece of it that was offered where it was really focused on American Indian communities. So I got to learn in school at a master's level, which is kind of sad, really the history of American Indian people in the United States of America. I didn't get that in high school, and so for me, it was challenging and really rewarding because I got to learn about where I came from and got a sense of pride. And also there were classes where we were able to have conversations about what it was like to be an American Indian person, and then you know, participate in the Summer Institute, a training program that's for tribal child welfare workers in the state, and also participate in other ceremonies that I never had access to. And so when I say that, that's really kind of what sparked me or spurred me into learning more about my culture. It really was like the catapult that just shot me forward. Yeah, so it was a really great program. I loved it.
Awesome. How did the center's cultural and spiritual foundations impact or support your worldview?
Okay.
As a Native?
I think I grew up on a reservation, and because I'm not full-blood, you know, I'm a half-breed, or what people say, I really struggled with my identity, and so I would be on the reservation and I wouldn't be accepted there, but I would live with my dad and I wouldn't be accepted there because I wasn't white enough, and on the res I wasn't brown enough. So I had an understanding of what both worlds were, but I always knew that I was different because in this world, dominant culture is everywhere. So anytime I stepped off the reservation, it was, you know, you dirty Indian. And so trying to filter through that and understand how that impacted my life while I was at my undergrad at Scholastica probably wasn't the best move for me. They don't come from the Indigenous perspective. And so at UMD, I felt like I learned a lot more because what was inside of me and what I grew up knowing was like the foundation or the basis for all of the learning and all of the conversations that we had there. So again, it really helped solidify my identity and help me be more comfortable as an American Indian woman.
Awesome. How did that carry over the education that you received at UMD? How did that impact your practice as a social worker?
So how it impacted my practice is I already look through that lens, and so working in a dominant culture agency, when I first started my career, I hadn't had that experience with UMD, and so I had a lot of internal struggles with kind of the judgments and some of the ways that people looked at the families that we worked with, and it was like reflecting on, well, that's kind of how my family grew up, and like, gosh, was I abused? Should I have been in foster care? Was that even safe for me? Like kind of questioning every experience that I had as a child when I was living with my mother on the reservation. And after going through UMD, it was like, no, that's normal and that's okay. And so how it impacted my practice was that little voice inside of me that I was like, oh, I guess that's not right. And maybe I shouldn't be looking at that or thinking that's okay for the families that I'm working with. That little voice got louder and stronger, and I became more confident in, no, my view is right, my experience was right, and when I go and meet with families who had similar experiences than me, that doesn't mean that their children should be removed or that their children are any less safe. I think it also helped me engage with families in a better way, because I struggled with understanding the culture prior to my experience. I didn't know how to have those conversations. I was really scared. So there's this thing out there where if you don't know, then you can't be in the arena, or you're not Indian enough. So my experience helped me to be more open, because I was in the presence of other people who were having the same struggle that I was having. And I was also noticing that with the families that I was working with, they were in the same place. So they were kind of starting off in the journey in the same place that I was starting off at. So I was able to have those conversations with them. Are you connected culturally in your community? If so, how can I support that? How does that impact your parenting? I learned a lot, but I also learned a lot about families and other ways that I could support them, and really understood the importance, because I knew in my heart the importance of keeping families connected to their culture and connecting them with cultural services. But through my experience at UMD, I was able to gather the language that I needed to be able to explain to my white counterparts, this is why it's important, because they can't hear my heart.
Yeah. So one more question.
Okay.
How important do you think it is for other schools of social work to look at UMD as a model for how they have educated you and other students who may not be Native to do this work with Native communities and families?
I think it's extremely important. I feel like the schools of social work now are headed into a mental health lens, and that's getting really far away from the work that child protection workers do, and further away from like the cultural identity that needs to be focused on for the families that we're serving. I'm not sure if I would be as far along in my career or have the same outcomes that I have with the families that I serve if I didn't have access to the UMD program, because I don't think I would have had that help with my identity and becoming a strong Indigenous Kwe. So I feel like it's really important to have a focus on American Indian communities, or even, if you're in other larger cities where it's a different population, that should be the focus of, if it's American Indian people, Hmong, Hispanic, any of the other cultures that are out there, African American, I think it's highly important, because the one thing that in learned social work through dominant culture lens, and then that's how I practiced. And when I went to UMD, I learned it through my lens that I felt more comfortable with, and then that's how I practiced, and it was very different. How I practiced before and how I practiced post MSW at UMD was different. I still really engaged well with families, but how I looked through the lens of the family and the system, and how I understood things was way different, so I was better able to advocate for families. So yeah, I think it's really important that the schools have a focus on whatever community is near them.
Awesome. I totally agree. Do you have anything else to add that you've maybe has come to your mind, or that you've thought about that you want to add?
I think there should be a piece in schooling or in programming where where folks get help with their own identity, whether they're American Indian, African American, white, whatever, and whatever walk of life they're from. I think folks, what I see in supervision now is that folks who are really strong and really set in who they are as a person have more confidence. So that doesn't mean that they're cocky or they come in, I know it all, but they know them. And that really helps in decision making, understanding their bias, and how their values and beliefs are impacting their decisions. Those folks are a lot further along in their confidence level than folks who are still kind of struggling to figure out who they are. And so I feel like if I reflect back on when I first started, I didn't have that at Scholastica or in my undergrad program. And I think that also played a role then when I did learn more about who I was. The change in my practice also had to deal with that, because I was more confident in who I was and how I walked through this earth. And so I think maybe adding some more of that. I think there is some kind of just naturally in the social work programs because you got to talk about those things that are lying underneath. But I think if there could be some things offered to really help push people a bit further along.
Yeah, great ideas. Thank you so much, Bobbi Jo, for sharing your experience and your expertise. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.